Good morning, Your Honor. Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Olivazos, Assistant District Attorney.
Good morning. This is the time for victim impact statements. Defendant entered a plea of guilty to count one, the charge of murder of Claude Snelling, which occurred on September 11th, 1975 in the county of Tulare, in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Paren A, murder in the first degree. Also, defendant admitted the uncharged acts as follows: kidnapping with intent to commit rape of Elizabeth Snelling, having occurred on September 11th, 1975 in the county of Tulare, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. Is there any member of the victim's family that wishes to be heard as to the charge of murder in the first degree, as well as kidnapping with intent to commit rape?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
My name is Elizabeth Hupp, and I would like to talk to you about my father, Claude Snelling, who saved my life when I was just 16 years old. It had been all over the local news about the man they called the Visalia ransacker, who was breaking into people's houses, going through underwear drawers, and taking items of no value. I could never imagine that the man who had been stalking me and peering in my bedroom window during the previous months would end up changing my life forever. My father caught him twice peering in my bedroom window when he came home from teaching night school, and tried to chase him down but was unable to catch him. On one occasion, I had even caught him myself peeping in my window when I had a feeling someone was out there. He took off when I saw him and screamed, and my dad and boyfriend ran after him, but he had too much of a head start and got away. Little did we know that the man stalking me was actually a police officer, someone who is sworn to protect people and not to terrorize and harm people. On September 10th, 1975, I went to bed like any other night without a care in the world. A few hours later, my world was turned upside down. At approximately 2 a.m., I was awakened by an intruder, James DeAngelo, who was wearing a ski mask and pointing a gun at me, saying that he was taking me with him and that if I made any noise, he would kill me. My father must have heard me crying and woke up. DeAngelo had dragged me out of the house, out the back door, and through the gate that separated our backyard from the carport and driveway, all the while having a gun pointed at my head. When we were under the carport, I heard my dad yell something and saw him pause in the kitchen just for a moment before he charged out of the house through the back door near us. DeAngelo fired 2 shots, hitting my dad. He then turned the gun on me as I was down on the ground. My only thought was, this is it, and put my head down, expecting him to kill me. Instead, he started kicking me in the head and face, then ran off down the driveway. I ran back into the house to find my dad had collapsed at the front door and my mom hovering over him. I knew in my heart that he was still trying to save me by going through the front door and cutting him off in the front yard, but he never got that far. My dad lay at the front door, bleeding to death. And ended up dying on the way to the hospital. I truly believe that if anything had happened to me that night and he couldn't save me, that would have killed him. For many years, I felt guilt for what happened that night. I felt that maybe there was something I could have done or said to warn my dad to stay there and never come out. It wasn't until I became a parent myself that I realized there was nothing I could have said that would have kept my dad from trying to save me. My mom always said that it wouldn't have mattered if there were 20 men out there with guns. That wouldn't have stopped them. My dad was such a gentle soul and loving, kind-hearted man who loved his family more than anything. My dad died saving my life that night, and he is my hero. My dad and I were always very close, and I loved him so much. We loved to go hiking in the mountains together, and we had some great talks. He was such a wonderful dad, was never judgmental and wouldn't preach to me. Instead, through talking about a situation I was dealing with, whether it was school, friends, or boys, he would help me figure things out on my own. My mom and dad both had a very strong faith in God, and we were always very active in the church. My dad taught Sunday school and Bible studies, and he was an usher and a deacon. However, his faith and goodness did not end at the church doors. It filled every part of his personal life with his family and friends, and his professional life as a journalism professor at College of the Sequoias with his colleagues and students. I believe he absolutely loved every aspect of his life. Our strong faith in God is what helped my mom and me and my two brothers, who were just 14 and 7 at the time, get through the tough years following my dad's death. We somehow managed to stay in the same house, but with added security. I slept in my mom's room for the next year because I was too afraid to sleep in my bedroom and be by myself. Knowing that my dad's murderer was never caught and was still out there somewhere left us all feeling very vulnerable. I was told by the detectives that since I was the only living witness to my dad's murder, there was a chance he could come after me. The police gave us extra security and patrolled our neighborhood every night to keep watch on our home, but I still lived in fear. Eventually, with God's help and the love and support of our family, friends, and our church family, our fear and grief lessened with time, and we started getting on with our lives. My mom never worried that the murderer was not caught. She always said he would face judgment from God eventually and turned it over to him. I started to believe that myself as well, and I didn't want to waste my life worrying that he was out there and could come back. On April 24th, 2018, I was shocked when I was informed that James DeAngelo was arrested in Sacramento and would be facing 13 murder charges, including my dad's. I truly never thought I would live to see that day, but unfortunately, my mom did not. We are also relieved and thankful for the perseverance of so many people who did not give up trying to solve this case. I would personally like to thank the Tulare County District Attorneys, Tim Ward and David Alavesos, and Renee Newman, the Tulare County Victims Advocate, as well as Detective James Cummings of the Visalia Police Department for keeping me informed and guiding me through these past 2 years. You have helped me deal with all of this more than you know. Next month, on September 11th, it will be 45 years since my dad was taken from us. He was only 45 years old at the time, in the prime of his life. Not having him here as part of my life left a huge hole in my heart. My dad was not around to walk me down the aisle when I got married, and our children were never able to know him. He would have been a wonderful grandpa. What sickens and angers me the most is that DeAngelo was able to live a normal life with his family for all those years, while my family and I could not be with my dad. I am so thankful that he will at least spend the rest of his miserable life in prison. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard as to count one? right, thank you. Furthermore, defendant admitted to the uncharged act of attempted murder of Officer Bill McGowan, having occurred on December 10th, 1975 in the county of Tulare in violation of Penal Code Section 664/187. Is there any victim or victim's family member that wish to be heard as to that uncharged act?
Good morning. My name is Lori Mendonca. I am the daughter of William McGowan, former Visalia Police Department detective. Good morning, and thank you, Your Honor, and Tulare County District Attorney, for allowing our family to participate in the court proceeding today. I am speaking today for my dad, who passed away 15 years ago, my mom, who is here with me, and the rest of the McGowan family. First, we would like to express our deepest sympathy and condolences to the other victims and their families who suffered unspeakable loss, pain, and violence at the hand of the defendant. Of all the victims of Mr. DeAngelo, we may be one of the least affected, but that does not mean that his crimes did not have a lasting impact on my family and my father. In reference to the shooting that occurred December 10th, 1975, my father, a veteran member of the Visalia Police Department, was on a stakeout in search of the Visalia ransacker. As evidence of Mr. DeAngelo's crimes committed by him was released, it became apparent that the defendant fully intended to kill my father that night, December 10th, 1975. Why didn't he succeed? My dad always held his flashlight up and out to the side of his head. The night of the shooting was a dark winter night, and when the defendant was ordered to stop, he jumped the fence and, quoting my dad, screamed like a woman and then fired at the light. The bullet hit the flashlight instead of the intended target, my dad. By the grace of God, Dad was only slightly injured with metal shards spraying his eye and face. Had the shot been mere inches to the right, it would have been a far different outcome, resulting in a severe injury or even death. Because he is unable to speak for himself, I would like for the defendant in court to know that contrary to some news accounts, television documentaries, and other reports, my dad's investigation and police work was correct on certain issues. He had seen the defendant before. He was certain of this. The defendant had a military background. He believed 100% that the Visalia ransacker and the East Area rapist were the same person. And he believed that his crimes would escalate from prowling and burglary to assaults that were much more violent. How did the defendant's crimes affect my father? My father felt personal responsibility to solve the case for the Snelling family. He knew Mr. Snelling. He had been my mother's teacher at COS, and he knew the family. He believed that the case could be solved if agencies worked together and shared information. There were negative comments and newspaper articles written questioning the Visalia Police Department and my father's motives for trying to share information with the other agencies. My dad never stopped looking for the ransacker. Every person he saw that resembled the composite, he would check out. It was always in the back of his mind. After Dad retired, officers continued to contact him for years for information about the case. Again, it was something he wanted to solve. It never ended. How did the crime affect my family? The night of the shooting and the days after were horrifying. Did the defendant know where we lived and who we were? Was he going to try to find my dad because he had seen him and could identify him? We did not know. After the attack on my dad my dad became very obsessive about safety. He placed deadbolts on all of our doors. We had wooden dowels in our windows. He detested sliding glass doors. We were never allowed to sleep with our windows open. He built wooden barriers and put them in front of my brother's and my bedroom window. We got a big dog. He never traveled without a gun. He was always watching and suspicious of other people. He meticulously checked doors and windows every night. We kept doors locked at all times, even when we were home. He never let his guard down. In closing, the day the defendant was arrested will forever be etched in our minds. This is something we never thought would happen. Justice will now be served for his numerous victims and their families, but it does not replace the anguish, fear, and enormous pain caused by his actions and crimes. He lived a full life that he denied to so many. I want to thank my dad for always protecting me and keeping me safe. My dad was more than just a name or a victim of Mr. DeAngelo. He was an excellent police officer, a husband, a great dad, a loving grandfather. He had a great sense of humor. He teased everyone, and he took pride in his work and his family. Thank you to Tulare County District Attorney for including our family in these proceedings, and thank you to all the law enforcement officers and other agencies that work together to solve these horrific crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anything else from the Tulare District Attorney's Office before we proceed? Very good, thank you. We'll move on to Sacramento, back to Sacramento case. Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, very good, thank you. We're returning back to additional victims' family on charged and uncharged acts committed by Mr. DeAngelo in the County of Sacramento. Mr. DeAngelo is present with counsel. Can the attorneys for the people of County of Sacramento restate their names for the record, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. Amy Holliday on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chin Hull on behalf of the people.
All right, thank you. On June 29th, 2020, the defendant entered guilty pleas to the following crimes. Count 2, charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, which occurred on February 2nd, 1978 in the County of Sacramento. Count 3, charge of murder in the first degree of Brian Majori, which occurred February 2nd, 1978 in the County of Sacramento. Is there any member of the victim's family that wish to be heard as to either counts 2 or 3?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir.
I'd like to thank you and the court for this opportunity. I would like to also thank each and every law enforcement personnel involved in getting us here today. I'd like to give a special acknowledgement to FBI agent Marcus Newton. He was a lifeline and lifesaver to me in the years leading up to this monster's arrest. I'd like to give a special thank you to Mei-Lin Chong and Ann Tran and our prosecuting attorneys, Mr. Tin Ho and Ms. Amy Holliday. I hope you all know how much you have meant to me and my family and will continue to mean to us. Finally, I want to thank my rock, my wife, she's been married to me for 39 years of this 42-year ordeal and always gives me strength. And if she can't find the right words, she always knows when to tell me. Call your grandbabies and find your smile. Your Honor, my family and I and many other families are all here to see the terror and evil that Mr. DeAngelo brought to so many finally come to an end. We can all start to put this horrible ordeal into its final stage of healing. He robbed my sister Katie and brother-in-law Brian of their young lives. He took away their chance to have a family of their own. He took away my brother's Keith's family's chance to get to know and love their aunt and uncle. He took away my wife and children and grandchildren's chance to know and love them. His mistake was he had no idea how much Katie and Brian were loved. They have remained alive in all our hearts. I recently learned something else. My sister Katie, who just turned 20, 4 days before DeAngelo chased her down and shot and killed her in cold blood, she touched so many others in just her 20 short years, not just our family with love and kindness, but so many friends also. I have found out that so many others have kept her in their hearts the whole 42 years since he took her life. So you see, Katie and Brian were special, and we all loved them so much. DeAngelo, you hurt our family and so many other families so much, but now that part's over. You no longer live in the shadows. We all know who you are. You lurked in the dark so you could prey on innocent victims. Well, now you are the prey, DeAngelo, and you can look over your shoulder the rest of your life. You can stop your silly little act of being weak and feeble and pay for what you did. You're not important. We will remember Katie and Brian for the rest of our lives, but after you're sentenced, you will be a nobody. You are not worth any more of my family's time. People like to say that now we can have closure. To me, closure means there's an end. There is no closure for us because nothing changes. It doesn't bring Katie or Brian back. I guess it does bring closure for DeAngelo, as this is the end for him. You can't hurt anyone ever again. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard at the counts 2 or 3?
Yes, Your Honor. That was Ken Smith, who was Katie Smith's brother, Katie Majori. This is Karen Smith, her aunt.
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
I'm here on behalf of Katie and Brian. They are my niece and nephew. They had everything going for them. Brian was just going to be shipped to Germany with the Air Force, and they were all excited because Katie got to go too. They loved life, and everybody loved them in the 18 months that they were married. I was actually pregnant with my son when Katie got married. So on January 29th, 1978, Katie calls and says, "Aunt Karen, you got to come over. It's my birthday," which I did. I said, "Well, Tommy's down for his nap. Well, wake him up. Come on over." So we did. So we sat there and we had birthday cake. Katie put Tommy in front of the cake because he was very special to Katie. and his fingers got right in there. She stands there and licks his fingers and said, now this is a birthday. So sure enough, oh, I already said that. It got later in the evening, so Katie and Brian had to leave and come home to Sacramento. Who knew that that would be the last time we see him? But on February 2nd, 1978, it was a parent's worst nightmare. The Air Force came to our shop and told the father, Katie's father, and someone had told my sister, Darlene. So what my husband calls, because we were in business, get over there. Something's happened. I had no idea that it was Katie and Brian had just been killed. So naturally, we all went. Kenny, my nephew, he was a junior in high school, ready to play baseball from McLean High School. Keith was only 10. Keith and Kenny no longer had a sister or brother-in-law to share the many years of happiness. They never got to have any more birthdays, no more holidays. Their grandkids never got to see him. Their kids never got to see him. But believe me, we all know who Katie and Brian are. It seems like yesterday it still seems like yesterday when this all happened. We will miss them to the end of time. The only thing I'm happy for is I got to live long enough to see this happen. I had met Mr. Majori at the cancer center a week before he passed. And his last words to me was, I just wanted to live long enough to see this. Well, Mr. Majori, I did. And I'm here to thank him and his family, our family, the Clumps, the Smith, the Majoris, for everything and all the support we've always had. And especially to all the people that have worked on this case. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, we do have one final message from Loretta Majori. She is Brian Majori's elderly mother. She could not be here today because of her frail health. She said that she has nothing good to say about Joseph DeAngelo, so she will say nothing at all to him.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. Does that conclude Sacramento's cases, at least for today?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, may we have a moment to transition to the next county?
Certainly.
Good morning. How are you guys doing? Okay.
Ready to proceed? Sir, are we ready to proceed? Not yet? All right.
Not yet, Your Honor.
All right,
Just
close.
one moment.
All right, that's all
We're
right.
waiting. Okay, yeah.
Thank you. This is the time we've scheduled to hear from victims' family involving the crimes and uncharged acts committed by Mr. DeAngelo in the county of Santa Barbara. The imposition of sentence will occur on August 21st of 2020. Mr. DeAngelo is present with counsel. Can we have attorneys that are representing the county of Santa Barbara please state their names for the record, please?
Joyce Dudley, District Attorney, Santa Barbara County.
Thank you.
Kelly Duncan, Chief Deputy District Attorney for Santa Barbara County.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
As I said, this matter is on a calendar to hear from victims and victims' family. On June 29th, the defendant entered a plea guilty to the following crimes. Count 4, the charge of murder in the first degree of Deborah Manning, which occurred December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. Count 5, charge of murder in the first degree of Robert Offerman, which occurred on December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. Is there any member of the victim's family that wishes to be heard as to either court counts 4 or 5?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll be reading Natasha Holliday and Roseanne Howard's victim impact statement for Deborah Manning.
Very good. Thank you.
Dr. Deborah Alexandra Manning was our best friend. The three of us met at the Veterans Administration Hospital and Children's Hospital of Boston, where Allie, as she liked to be called, was finishing her neuropsychology internship. She had the gift of intuition that served her patients well. Allie was beautiful and brilliant. She brought joy and healing energy wherever she went. On December 30th, 1979, Joseph James DeAngelo ended Allie's life, a life that gave so much hope and so much light. In the early morning hours, DeAngelo broke in while she slept. Allie was tightly bound, brutally raped, and then turned face down on the bed. He proceeded to murder her with 2 close-range shots to the back of her head. Her boyfriend, Robert Offerman, was found on the floor beside the bed with his body bludgeoned, beaten, and shot 4 times. Impervious to the carnage and killings, DeAngelo bizarrely ate their leftover Christmas turkey and burglarized the condo. On the Thursday night before her death, Allie called us and said, "I feel like I'm being followed. I have Bob's big yellow Mercedes parked at the front door. It's like a large yellow lion protecting me." The next day at lunch with her lawyer, Allie wrote out a holographic will on her napkin. In less than 48 hours, she was dead. We often wondered whether Allie would be alive today if only we had insisted that she call the police to report a stalker. Perhaps she'd be married with children and grandchildren and have an accomplished professional record with published journal articles and books. Instead, her vibrant life lay wasted by the obsessive madness of Joseph James DeAngelo, a man we find hard to forgive. Allie's not here to speak, but we, Roseanne Howard and Natasha Holliday, are here to provide a statement on her behalf. Almost 41 years later, the sordid, tortured, and violent circumstances under which our dear friend died continues to haunt us. We miss Allie. While we have grown our own families and had our own professional accomplishments, Allie was denied those opportunities. Her future was stolen. We regularly miss her friendship in our lives and her presence around our children and grandchildren. Allie's death not only reached deep into our lives, but cut across the Santa Maria community of her patients, friends, and mother, causing her mental and physical demise. When going through her family therapy office after her murder, we found her patients' heartfelt letters and drawings as a testament to how her patients valued her. Her vulnerable patients, some whom were children, were left to cope with Allie's horrific rape and murder. Their doctor of light and hope, and our best and loving friend was gone forever. In closing, thank you to those who never gave up on their pursuit of justice, the Northern and Southern California police, the journalists and the bloggers who kept the public eye focused on the case, and the prosecutors in the Northern and Southern District Attorney's Office of California and their staff. Finally, we would like to acknowledge the strength and courage of all the survivors and their families and partners who came forward with their testimony. You are all real heroes. Thank you, Roseanne Howard and Natasha Holliday.
Thank you, counsel. Is there any other victim impacts on counts 4 and 5?
There is not.
Count 6, Mr. DeAngelo entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder in the first degree of Sherry Domingo, which occurred July 27, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. Count 7, the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, which also occurred on July 27, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. Is there any member of the family that wished to be heard as to counts 6 and 7, the murders of Sherry Domingo or Greg Sanchez?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, sir.
The pain for our family goes well beyond the words I'm able to share with you. And I'm not going to attempt to convey the level of hurt for our Greg Sanchez. It's been a crippling process for many years. The trial will hopefully be the beginning of the end for our ordeal. Listening to the victim impact statements this week has been a challenge for all of us. Increasingly frustrating to hear the victims' families who follow the previous victim on this timeline of horror over the years from the same perpetrator. Long before COVID-19, the DeAngelo virus infected our families and our communities. My youngest son, who's here today, asked me, how could this happen? How could this go for so long and not be solved? It's convenient and perhaps easy for me to tell him that the times were different, that technology today and social media would have not allowed this to have happened. That being said, there were 2 double homicides in the same neighborhood, with the same motive, and this followed an attempted double homicide in the same neighborhood. Let's all be clear. Cooperation between communities would have undoubtedly stopped DeAngelo virus from spreading. Technology and social media would have forced the hand, I think, of a lot of the communities. I've heard a lot of discussion this week about how adaptive, how smart, how potentially cunning this virus was. He was an officer. He knew the likelihood that jurisdictions each wanted to solve their own case, and that drive created an environment for lack of sharing and communication. Greg and Sherry didn't deserve any of this. It's been 14,269 sunrises that Greg and Sherry have not had. You took beautiful lives in horrific ways. It's by the grace of God that Sherry's daughter, Debbie, was not home at the time. All of our lives were forever changed. You've tortured the parents, the families, for 39 years. My grandmother, Palmita, later in her life could not remember Greg had passed. She would ask where Gregory was, and we couldn't answer that question. Each day, the same question, the same blank stare, and all we could say is that he's resting in heaven. Our memories of Greg will not be tarnished by the acts of the virus sitting in court today, but by the love we have for him in our hearts. Greg was in the prime of his life at 27 with all the dreams ahead of him. Greg will always be remembered for having a big presence and a big smile. I sincerely hope that Greg hurt you bad that night and brought you some well-deserved pain and fear. Enough for you to have at least stopped for the next 5 years. To say our family is in grief is an understatement. Calling this true justice is probably an overstatement. Injecting disinfectant into this virus is probably not a bad idea. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to be heard as to these counts, 6 and 7?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Debbie McMullen will read her victim impact statement for Sherry Domingo.
Very good. Proceed when you are ready.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
Before I present my statement, I want to thank you, both of the legal teams, all of the district attorneys and investigators who have brought us to this point. I especially want to thank the staff in the courtrooms and at the Sacramento County Jail for maintaining custody of inmate DeAngelo, for assuring that he made it here to appear in court this week. My heart is racing. Bear with me.
Take your time, ma'am.
Thank you. I also want to thank my husband, my daughter, my brother, who are all here with me today, as well as my longtime friend and support person, Melanie Barbeau. I couldn't do this without you. My circle of support is enormous, and I'm grateful. My name is Debbie Domingo McMullen, and I am the surviving daughter of Sherry Domingo, murdered 7/27/81 by Joseph James DeAngelo, Jr. I am speaking here today not directly to DeAngelo or for his benefit. I am here today to have on the record the repercussions that his actions have had on my life. Maybe you, Judge Bowman, or you, my fellow survivors, so many survivors, will understand. Maybe some of you, the public who hear this either now or later, will be able to get a slightly clearer glimpse into what survivors of murdered victims endure. I will not speak directly about my own experiences only, but to honor the memories of Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez. Mom was only 35 when she died, but she was energetic and stylish, and strangers often took us for sisters. Greg was even younger, just 27. With a quick wit, stunning good looks, and a charming smile. He was always busy doing something productive and fun, fixing up his old 57 Chevy, playing softball with his brothers, mixing recordings of our favorite popular dance music. These two people created the easy listening soundtrack that still plays in my head and my heart. I cherish the reflections of a time when there was always sunshine and music, even when things weren't perfect. Mom and Greg were two remarkable, young, vibrant people who were denied the opportunity to even be breathing today. When I sat down to write this statement, my first instinct was to document the ups and downs my life has taken in the nearly 40 years since the homicides. It seemed a daunting task. Only now am I realizing the magnitude of the impact that losing my mother and her sweet boyfriend in such a violent way had on my young life and on my view of the world. When I took my first steps toward the yellow crime scene tape around our house in 1981, I knew my life was changing. You can't be stopped by police and yellow tape and not be stunned. It was surreal, almost like slow motion, but over in a flash. Life would never be the same, but I was only 15 years old and unable to truly grasp that concept. My mom and my beloved Greg were dead. The house looked picture perfect from the outside, but I was told that on the inside, the scene was grisly. I was not permitted back into the house, ever. Not to look for my cat, not to pack my bedroom, not to verify for myself that what the police said had happened was even true. I didn't realize it then, but I had watched my mom and Greg dance carefree across our living room for the last time. The next few hours and days were bizarre. I called my dad, who lived several hours away. I called my maternal grandmother out of state. And I talked to the police. I was a fragile teenager whose world had just been turned upside down, but I had to answer questions from a stranger in a polygraph examination. Do you know who killed your mother? No. Did you kill your mother? Oh God, are they really asking me this? No. I helped the police sort out which items from the home stayed in the house and which I would take to my new home at Dad's. I attended a memorial service for my mom at our church. I'm sure there must have been a service for Greg too, but I don't remember having the chance to really say a good goodbye to his parents or his brothers. There has always been an emptiness in my heart from that lingering loss. Not just of Greg, but of his beautiful family. Within just a few days, I said goodbye to my friends and left for Southern California, where we had Mom's funeral and interment. I have the guest books from both of her services, but no clear memories of those or of her burial. Oddly, I do remember helping my grandfather pick out her casket and helping my grandmother design and order her headstone. I remember how devastated they both were, having to bury their own child. I turned 16 a few days after Mom was buried. There was a small impromptu party at a pizza place, I think, but I don't really remember that either. In the mix of it all, I remember feeling lost, but I also recall being so thankful that I had a safe place to land. I had already lived from time to time with my dad and my stepmom in San Diego County. It was an environment where I was taken care of and loved. I had brothers and extended family there. I had friends at school and at church. It was almost as if I was plucked up out of the horrors that had taken place in Santa Barbara and set down into a whole new life in Southern California. The only problem was I wasn't a whole new me. I was a traumatized teenager, reeling from the horror and pretending to be an okay version of me. How are you doing, honey? People would ask. I'm fine. I'll be okay. Oh, and I never cried. I did have dreams, not really nightmares, but definitely disturbing dreams. I dreamt that instead of being away on the night of the murders, I was actually at home in my bed, upstairs at the far end of the house. In my dreams, I heard the intruder enter our home. I heard my mom scream, the gunshot, and a scuffle. In that dream, I picked up the phone next to my bed and called for help. Police arrived, and everyone survived. Of course, each time I had this dream, I woke up to the grim reality that my mom and Greg were indeed dead, and there was nothing I could do to change that. By the end of the first year after the murders, I stopped waiting for calls from detectives and hoping for new leads. It was just too depressing. I gave up on the case and tried to distract myself with normal teenage activities. Somehow, by the skin of my teeth, I finished my last 2 years of high school, and then it started, adulthood, without my mom to lead the way. I did have a great support system, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have my mom or the skills to express how much I missed her. When DeAngelo stole my mom from me, he didn't just take away a person from my daily routine. He stole my vision of the future. He took away my desire and my passion to look ahead, to set goals, to strive for success. He left me empty. For the 20 years that followed my mother's murder, I lived in a series of half-hearted attempts to just get by. I knew the case was cold, and I resigned myself to the fact that it would probably never be solved. A hard pill to swallow, but I had to just stuff it all and find a way to go on. I had always been a good student, and it was assumed that I would attend a university and have a successful career. Doing what? I had no idea, but I definitely knew that potential was there. After Mom's murder, I failed to develop that university mindset. In fact, I had a hard time even graduating high school at all. I followed a boyfriend's lead and enlisted in the Army. The marketing phrase at the time was, "Be all you can be." Ironically, I only served a short-lived, respectable yet unremarkable term of service. I became a parent at 20, but rather than embracing that role and being intentional about raising the adults of the future, I simply took care of my kids, and I didn't do that very well. Early into motherhood, I started to sink into a depression that would go undiagnosed and untreated for many years. By the time I was 24, I had stumbled into drug use, and that started a fast downward spiral. Ultimately, a decade was lost in a lifestyle of degradation, abuse, neglect for myself and my family. All the while, I knew deep inside that I had problems for which I needed to seek help. But my self-esteem and confidence had fallen so low, I lacked the gumption to make change. Mom would have helped. In fact, if Mom were alive then, she would have nagged at me early on to stop settling for less. She would have prompted me to dream a little more. She would have supported me and guided me towards solutions. She would have prodded me into admitting that I needed help. She would have relentlessly reminded me that I could do better, that I could be better, that I deserved better. She would have led by example, a life of victory no matter the circumstances. Her optimism was her gift, along with her unfailing love and determination. Even Greg, with his talent for coaching and encouraging, would surely have shared some words of motivation. I can almost hear him. "Come on, Deborah D., you're stronger than you think." Fortunately and miraculously, God found a way to reach me even without Mom and Greg at my side. When I was 30, my children were taken into the custody of Child Protective Services. I looked into the mirror to see myself, single, childless, unemployed, addicted to methamphetamine, hopeless, homeless. I worked with CPS and the family court system on a family reunification plan. Their requirements for me were simple enough: get off drugs, find a reliable job, and maintain a suitable home. Unfortunately, I was so broken that I could only typically achieve one or maybe two of those objectives for a short period only. Sustaining all three at once was just too much for me to handle. I felt like I was running on a treadmill and juggling at the same time. The speed and the incline of the treadmill kept changing at random intervals. I was off balance, trying to stay upright at just the right pace without dropping the balls. It seemed impossible. I lost hope several times and would have considered suicide if it weren't for the fact that I had children who were desperately waiting for me to straighten myself out and bring them home. Waiting for the security of a life with Mom that every child deserves. After several years in that miserable cycle of despair, I experienced a true miracle. I had an encounter with Jesus Christ that not only saved my life, but put me on the path to restoration with my children. By the time I was 34, I was clean and sober, working full-time, and welcoming my kids into the home that I provided. Where'd you go? A few years after that, the unthinkable happened. Out of the blue, I learned that my mom and Greg's murders might be part of a series. I learned that there was an investigation into the possible connections and an active search for the unknown serial predator. I am a firm believer in God's perfect timing. So now, in retrospect, it makes sense to me that only after I was ready and able to engage was I made privy to the fact that investigation was active again. I had spent the first 20 years believing that the truth of my mom and Greg's murders would remain a mystery forever. I have now spent the better part of the second 20 years working toward helping to publicize and solve that mystery. At first, I would just dig online, lurk on internet message boards, watch and read anything I could get my hands on that discussed these crimes. In some ways, it was therapeutic, rehashing memories and playing my small part in the hunt. However, it was during these years that the true nightmares emerged. The more I learned about the crime scene, the more vivid my dreams became. The worst were the ones where I was the proverbial fly on the wall in Mom's bedroom. I could hear the door scratch its way across the shag carpet, and I could see Greg in his nakedness and in the dark, fighting for his life against a masked intruder who was fully dressed and armed to the teeth with flashlight, gun, and bludgeon. I could see my mom lying naked on her side with her hands and feet bound tightly together behind her, hogtied, shivering in terror as she watched Greg being pulverized and knowing she was next. Did she beg for her life? Did the monster say anything to her? Did he reveal his face before smashing hers? I considered enlisting the help of a medium to ask Mom if she could tell us who he was. Those years were tough. I would wake up drenched in sweat and then make a beeline for my laptop and double down on my efforts to help identify the monster and raise public awareness. The good news is that I'm sorry, I can't see through my tears. Yes. More. Oh man. See, this does get to good news. The good news is that as I learned more and more and started interacting with people who were also passionately seeking answers, my mission evolved. For the first time in my life, I had clear-headed laser focus on an important goal. I was no longer just an orphaned daughter without a shred of hope. I became a voice and an advocate for the many, many victims in this series of crimes. I don't know if DeAngelo was ever aware of my efforts to find him out. But if he didn't know my name before, he'll know it now. Today I am Debbie Domingo McMullen, surviving daughter of Sherry Domingo, whose murderer now has a name and a face. I am no longer plagued by images of a masked, faceless monster raping, terrorizing, and bludgeoning my beautiful mother. I am not that lost teenager anymore. Today, I am in the room with the pathetic excuse of a man who will now finally be held accountable for his actions. If I had my way, he would be shivering, blindfolded, naked, and exposed every moment from now on. I'll settle for caged, shackled, humiliated. Oh, and nervous as hell, because everyone around him in prison will know exactly who he is and what deplorable things he has done. Today, the devil loses and justice wins. Today, I am not just a broken survivor of a cold case murder. Today, I am a victor in the battle between good and evil. I am the wife of a wonderful, wonderful, God-fearing man who has stood by my side as we have nurtured our family, which includes 5 grown children and 8 grandchildren. And my sister survivor, Gay Hardwick, said it yesterday. That's what a real man does. I have 22 years of sobriety under my belt. I have parents, in-laws, and extended family who have never faltered in their love and support. I have a dedicated family of faith with whom I share my Christian walk. I have an amazing career in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where, believe it or not, I am able to minister daily to convicted felons, and they also minister to me. Best of all, I have an entire family that I never would have known if it weren't for this whole ugly series of crimes. I have my case family made up of investigators, lawyers, citizen detectives, victim advocates, media representatives, and of course, my precious fellow survivors. It is undeniable that the early loss of my mother had a significant impact on the choices I made in my young life. I have lived the past 39 years without her close influence and guidance. However, I would never try to blame past trauma for my own poor decisions. I alone am responsible for my own ways and deeds, just as DeAngelo is responsible for his. I have spent years owning up to my wrongs and doing my best to make amends. Now it is DeAngelo's turn. Whether that can or will happen remains to be seen. When DeAngelo viciously murdered my mom, he altered my vision of the future, but he didn't ruin it altogether. DeAngelo stole a lot from me, that's for sure. But I have to be honest. God has restored my life to something so full and so beautiful that even the devil himself could not destroy. Despite the fact that I had to grow up without Greg and my mom, and despite my own mistakes, I managed to become a responsible, caring human being. One with a clear conscience, who nurtures and supports others, and who will always speak the truth with love. Despite the fact that DeAngelo killed my mom and deeply hurt my family, I became part of another family. I am not alone, ever. DeAngelo may have tried to spread evil into my world and even into my soul, but he failed. And whatever justice is meted out by this judicial system, I believe that it pales in comparison to the ultimate justice that awaits him when he leaves this earthly life. Tonight, DeAngelo will toss and turn on that cold steel bunk in his cell, knowing the trauma that he caused to hundreds, including his own family. He will spend eternity alone, wishing he had lived his life differently. Tonight, I will sleep soundly, and in my dreams, I will see my mom and Greg still smiling, still dancing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, Dave Domingo will read his victim impact statement for Sherry Domingo as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir.
My name is David Scott Domingo. I'm the son of Sherry Domingo, who was raped and beaten to death by Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. on July 27th, 1981. This statement is my one chance to tell the court in my own words how my life has been affected by DeAngelo's sadistic murder of my mother. But candidly, even though I've had 39 years to sort it out, I still don't really understand how I've been affected because it's been extremely difficult for me to process. Until June 2018, I really felt no confidence at all that my mom's killer would ever be found and prosecuted. I just felt futility. That was compounded by other factors that made it hard to think about and talk about. Even in the 2 years since DeAngelo was caught, I've been reluctant to delve into the facts of my mom's death or my feelings about it. But I know that making this statement is an important part of administering justice, and it's done me some good already to think through this and at least begin to acknowledge some of the impacts that I'm aware of. Joseph DeAngelo brutalized and murdered my mother, Sherry Domingo, and Greg Sanchez, a good man whom I knew as her boyfriend, when I was 14. I was sheltered from some of the immediate effects of the crime. I had been living hundreds of miles away from Goleta with my dad and our blended family. And on the night it happened, I was halfway across the country having a carefree summer vacation with my stepmom and stepbrothers. I heard about the murders in a phone call from my dad. I remember him telling me that there were police outside of my mom's house and 2 people dead inside the house. He also said, "I wish I could hug you right now." He didn't actually say who was dead because at that point, nobody knew for sure, but we all assumed it was Mom and Greg. My stepmom found out at the same time I did in the same way over the phone. She walked to me crying and she just hugged me. I wanted to cry, but nothing came out. I went outside by myself for a long time and continued trying to feel something, but there was nothing except shock, I guess. And since then, every time I've allowed myself to think about the details of DeAngelo's attack on my mom and Greg and the way that they suffered, I've reacted pretty much the same way I did then. No tears, just shock. I've cried very few times in my life since 1981 over this or anything else. Back home, no one in my community knew about the incident or my connection to it. If I wanted any of my friends to understand what I was dealing with, I had to tell them myself. After a few of those kinds of conversations, I found it was just too rough on me and on the people I told. The things DeAngelo did were too vile to talk about with other teenagers. So I stopped talking about it then when it would have done the most good, and I've hardly talked about it with anyone since. Shock, futility, and secrecy, those are the impacts that I've been dealing with day to day for 39 years. And those dysfunctions have made it difficult for me to acknowledge an even bigger impact, the loss of my mother. But this is one day when I'm definitely going to acknowledge it. I'd like to tell you about my mother from the perspective of the teenage boy I was when I last saw her. My mom was a new single parent at that time, but she was handling it well, and she never eased up on the affirmation and affection that she showed to Deb and me. She kept calling me Sugar Bear, even though I felt I had outgrown that. She encouraged me to do things that I was into, like draw cartoons and play in band. She gave me a lot of freedom to roam around town and goof off with my friends or just be alone, but she stayed accessible to me and listened to me and consoled me when I needed it. She had impeccable style and bought me great clothes that I was not embarrassed to wear. And she invested time in Debbie and me, hanging out and listening to records with us at home, including us in get-togethers with Greg and his family and other friends of hers, taking us on trips to cool places up and down the coast, and taking us to movies and out for really good food all the time. That's the beautiful person, the loving mom that DeAngelo took from me when he murdered Cheryl Grace Smith Domingo. And he didn't just take her from me. There are many others who have been affected by her death and by Greg's, some affected much worse than I was, whose statements the court will not get to hear. I don't believe in supernatural things. I don't believe there's a hell for Joseph DeAngelo to suffer in when he eventually dies. I don't believe there's a heaven where the people he made to suffer can have a second life full of joy and free of pain and grief. And I don't believe that the horrific things he did happened for a reason. They were part of DeAngelo's sick plan and nobody else's. I say this not to disparage anyone's more optimistic worldview, but to assert that from my perspective, the only justice I'm ever going to get related to the torture and murder of my mother is the justice that happens in this life, imperfect as it will have to be. That's why I'm so thankful to be here this week to witness the sentencing of my mother's killer. I'm beyond grateful to everyone who's had a part in investigating DeAngelo's crimes and in finding him, arresting him, and prosecuting him. And I thank the court for allowing survivors to help dispense justice this week by making sure the last words DeAngelo hears outside of prison are damning and memorable.
Thank you, sir. Does that conclude the Santa Barbara's portion?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ho, are we going forward? My schedule shows lunch break. We're a little early for that.
Yes, Your Honor, we are early. The rest of the victim impact statements for Ventura County and Orange County are scheduled for this afternoon. So we'd ask to recess early today, this morning, so we can take care of that this afternoon.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and take our recess. It's going to be a little bit longer than usual. We'll reconvene at 1:30 back in this department. Sorry for any inconvenience. Attorney, stay behind, please.